So, guys, the today's topic is foreign policy decision making, domestic influence, legislature. It means that if you want to understand this topic in detail, so let's start video from the foreign policy. We start from the introduction that how the foreign policy decisions they are directly influenced by the states in domestic environment, including the legislature. The foreign policy includes all the interactions of the individual nations with other nations. It's very simple. It means that the foreign policy is about establishing relationship among the nation states, and in the wake of the globalization in this modern world and this 21st century, it is particularly important owing to the interdependence of the states. With the advent of the international society and the globalization, implications of the foreign policy for each nation state are far greater. And the study of the foreign policy therefore has become even more critical and important. So that's why we have to keep an eye on the domestic influence, that how the domestic environment of the state that directly influence the decisions of the foreign policy. The study of the foreign policy is not limited to any particular school of the social science. As I already stated that the study of the foreign policy it is not limited in any particular school of social science, but it is a relevant subject for all. The foreign policy, it is directly connected with the current scenario of the globalization of the global politics. So we take and we change the trends of the foreign policy according to the changing demands of our domestic or our international environment. In international relations, this study is particularly important as the foreign policy from the piece for the international interactions between the individual states. Or in the 21st century, decisions by one state they morely affect just the participating state. By the one state, they affect more than just the participating countries. Scholars, as well as the policy analysts, and even the general public, they have a greater desire to understand the foreign policy decisions. What motivate the head of the government or head of the state in his foreign policy decision making? The popular press prefers the founding figure at the executor of the foreign policy decisions, as it is easier to blame one person than a group or system. However, the scholarly research uncovered the motivations behind the foreign policy decisions that are taken by the executor, or in the better words, head of the government. The scope of the head of the government, that the head of the government, it directly influences the foreign policy decisions, and other factors the personality of the leader, rationality, that how much he is rationalized in taking decisions, or whether he is a bias towards any state or any nation, and how the biased attitude towards personality affects the decisions of the foreign policy, and how it is whether it is damaging the state's national interest, and whether he is beneficial, his decisions are beneficial for the state's national interest. International organizations, of course, they also had influence on the head of the government. If we talk about the world famous international organization, that is United Nations, that whose decisions they are very kind of a command for every nation state, and they are very valuable by all the nation states of the world, and they are given due weightage in the foreign policy making of any state. I'm not particularly um, I'm not particularly confining one state. Its decisions they are his values. It's the decisions that are being taken by the United Nations. They are given due value and they have a carry weightage and the foreign policy making. However, they can also be compromised by the political environment. If I summarize this, it means that some of the decisions of the foreign policy they are being compromised by the political environment. They depending on the kind of a system that has been practiced by the that government. Like in the democracy, we give due weightage to the opposition decisions if they are suitable for our national interest. The important impact of the political environment of the leaders, decision making in the leaders in different political systems. The United Nations, as I have given you example. If we talk about the world democracy, the United Nations, it is a constitutional republic. Representative democracy, whereas the China, it is a centrally governed socialist republic. On the other hand, Jordan is a constitutional monarchy. I have present the picture of the different nations of the different states, that how the different system of government they have a different form of democracy, and how their system of government is impacting their how the political environment it being influencing the foreign policy decisions. So as I previously I was talking about the two level gap between the international and the domestic politics. It means that the head of government in any kind of political system it is motivated by the two similar goals. The domestic politics, if it is influencing the decision he wants to achieve through the foreign policy, or he wants to achieve through the foreign policy, so the environment that is the factors or that agenda that is being affecting his decisions, he the head of the state he tries to ignore that domestic chaos or the domestic agendas which are hindering his foreign policy decisions. Strategic perspective is a theoretical approach that views the individuals as choosing their actions by taking into account the anticipated actions and responses or others with the intentions of maximizing their own welfare. Domestic politics plays a very important role when taking the strategic foreign policy decisions, because the threats anticipated or already executed are to do with the national security issues. It means that some of the strategies that are being adopted on the domestic level to remove or to bring prepare by the defensive view to secure the nationals, to secure the nation's inhabitants from the foreign threats. So I think that are very important, and it's a very valuable and it's very informative presentations. If you have any questions, you can comment me, and if you want any new video on any kind of topic, you can comment below, give this video thumbs up and share. So the conclusion of this topic is the domestic and the individuals they affect or influence the foreign policy process. It means that the personality of the leaders, the domestic factors, and the head of the government, they have a very great influence. They greatly affect the decision, the strategies, and the scenario of the foreign policy. So that's all for it. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks a lot.